Hi, my name is Claude Rémiard, and today we'll talk about Azure DevTest Lab. Azure DevTest Lab is a new service. Actually, it's a new developer service available on the Azure platform. So when we look at doing dev and test environment on-prem, there are some issues with that. In many cases, it takes a long time to get an infrastructure ready. It can take days, weeks, or even months. The cost of the infrastructure, which is always on, is significant. And actually creating the environment, making it similar to production so that our tests are valid that we do in development, takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. So a lot of organizations are looking at going to the cloud to do their dev and test environment. We can actually get an environment very quickly. We can only pay for what we need as we go. And basically, developers can just start working and directly have the environment and use configuration that is similar to what we have in production. So to do that with Azure, we're introducing the Azure DevTest Lab. So the idea of the lab, it's actually an additional construct that we have on Azure where we can subset all of Azure for the development teams to work in, and developments and testers. So what we can do in the lab is actually, out of everything that's available on Azure, we can subset exactly what our team needs. We can create templates that we can reuse, again, to get those environments very quickly. We can set quotas, we can set policies. So what I'll do is I'll go directly into the software and show what it looks like. So here I'm on the Azure portal, and from the portal, as a developer here, I see that we have a lab for my team, which is the team queue. And in this team, when I get in there, actually the fastest way for me to get to a VM is just to go and access one of my VM that's already provisioned that I've been working with on my lab. Another option is actually go and pick an existing VM that was created overnight by the system. So my lab admin can set the creation of VMs with the latest bits that I need to work on. And in the morning, I can just go and claim a VM. So it will remove it from the VMs available for the lab, gives it to myself, and actually then I can just go and connect to the VM and basically work with it. So now it will be one of my own VM. The advantage is that there's no installation that's required. So we have this pool of VMs with the latest version installed on it, with all the tools I need, and I can just go pick it and start working. We're using that internally, and it's one of the features that is really, really appreciated by our developers. However, if I want to create my own VM and do something different than the standard one that we have from the latest build, I can go and just create a brand new VM. So from there, when we create a new environment or a new VM, we actually just start with a base template. I'll just take a Windows template to start with. And then from there, I can give it VM name, user, and password. And actually, the VM itself is already all predefined, so I could just go and create the VM using the template directly. Or I can actually go and pick, for example, which size I want my VM to be. And then you'll notice here, I don't have all the size available, so my administrator has set which size of VMs are available for this lab, so I can pick on one of these. And I can actually go and pick a number of artifacts. So the idea of artifacts, those are components of your app, tools that you have, public tools that you have decided to associate to your lab. So just adding them to the lab or having the lab point to where they stand in source control. And basically, from there, I can decide to go and add additional components. So in this case, for example, the first three are already baked into my image, and I'm adding 2 additional components that will install when I create my VM. So from there, I can just go and select my components, and then I would fill in the parameters that I need for the installation of these additional components. We have default value for everything, and then we can go and add specific if needed. And then from there, I would just go and create my VM. You'll notice here, we do have a schedule shutdown opt-out. So basically, we have some policy we can set to automatically shut down VMs when they are not in use. There are certain cases, for example, if the VM I'm creating is the one that will run my test harness, where my test results would be, I might want to keep it on and actually disregard the shutdown policy. So I could do that by by opting out, or it's just a regular VM and I want it to shut down when on schedule, then it will do that and follow the policies we have. And then from there, I can go and just create my VM, and I will get an additional VM with all the components that I have defined for it. So a lot of it seems fairly easy to do. So from the end user, it's really, I just pick what I need. Either it's pre-created for me, it's one of the existing one, or I can compose it using pre-done things. So a lot of the work actually comes with the idea of having somebody on the team, or either inside the team or external to the team, set up some of the quotas and rules on the lab itself, and you would set up once how you install the various components you're interested in and the various tools. So basically all the artifacts that you're consuming. So you would do that once for your lab, and then from there, you can reuse them. So I'll go through how we actually do that. So the first thing you can set for the lab is some quotas. So the first one is a monthly budget. So that's a target budget we have for the team. And for that budget, we're actually giving you some tracking where we're able to see how much are we spending right now for this lab. Are we projecting that we're going to meet our budget or not? If not, then we can look at our policies, or we can adapt behavior or plan for the actual spend that we will have. We can also set some alerts if we start seeing that we will not meet budget, or that we will run out of what we expected to spend for the month. The other policies that we can set is the number of VMs that every user can create on the lab. So in this case, every user can create 5. The objective there is really for helping the team to self-police themselves, so that if normally we establish for my team in our normal environment 5 VMs should be enough, then before I create the 6th one, I need to look back at my existing 5 ones and say, well, is there one of them that is useful or not? We will add overrides where for certain individual that actual maximum can be higher. For example, somebody running performance tests and so on. But this one is really the basic kind of default for the lab, as well as we can set a max as a team total. So you could set a very high max for everybody, but as a team, this is roughly the limit we should have. And again, the limit helps you control your cost and help you being aware that when you're starting to not cleaning up VMs that you don't use anymore. I mentioned earlier when I was creating the VM, the idea of selecting VM size. So here as the admin, this is where I can go and set which VM sizes are available for the lab. And then when you create them, those are the ones that the user can use. Another set of policies that we can do is actually shutdown policies. So you can set a policy when a VM is not being used, in this case after 30 minutes, then it will shut down itself. And then when I come back to the lab, I need to restart it. So there's a restart time that is required. The only distinction, as I noted earlier, is that when we do shut down, we lose memory state. So it's important to keep them up if you want to keep things that are in memory. And then we also give the ability to add some scheduled shutdown at the end of the day. We will add some start in the morning, and we're also thinking of a few more options in there. But basically right now we're looking at a basic shutdown at the end of the day or an idle shutdown. And again, the goal there is to make sure that when you're using your environments, that they're available, and when you don't, when you leave for the day, that you don't pay for what you don't need. So I showed earlier how we used artifacts, so let's look at how we created them. So here I have my list of artifacts available for the team. So if I want to add a new one, actually it's fairly straightforward, as much as these things can be straightforward. So when you create a new artifact, you'll give it a name and a description that will show in the list for people to pick it up. And then what we're looking at is having the script that actually install the component to be defined here. And that script can be a PowerShell, a Bash script, or it can call a script that call a chef and run a chef recipe. So basically here we're fairly open in terms of if we can run it on the host, we'll run it, and basically we'll start the installation. And again, for that specific component, with the way it installs, then you can specify which parameters you have, which one are required, and default values. So that, again, the idea is to put the complexity of the installation script and how to add it to the lab once when we set it up. And after that, we just use it and it becomes fairly straightforward. The other thing that I also showed earlier from the user perspective is the idea of the template. So the template really is this idea of saying when you look at the VM, the way we're looking at it, we call it the Chipotle pattern. Basically, you select your base and you add your different components, more or less like, you select your protein and then you add your different condiments and vegetables on top of it. So it's the same idea. So the template is the whole thing. So it describes the whole VM. So here, in this case, if I add a new template, I would just go and pick a base image I can start from. And the base image is important and interesting there. It can be either a standard Azure image, so you can start with them, or it can be a custom image that you yourself have created. And the idea of selecting what you put in the image versus what you add as an artifact every time that you install is really based on what's volatile and installation time. So for example, if you want to create automatically a number of VMs available for your team to claim, actually creating a base image that contains most of everything you need and then just use it to replicate is probably the way to go. However, if you want to use them during the day and on demand, then you would put less in the image and just reinstall with the latest version. So it's really what is very volatile, you'll want to install every time. What is less volatile, you'll try to bake into the image. We do have a full suite of command lines and APIs for the lab, so that from your build system, for example, or directly from the command line, you can actually create a VM and then take the image from that VM and turn it into a template so that you can use it again as with everything baked in. So in this case, I will go to the route where I don't bake in everything. I start with a base image. I pick a size for my template, and then I would pick the artifacts that would get added when I use that template to create a VM. So again, start with the image. That's very quick, and then we install latest version that we have based on the artifacts definition that we have defined, and then fill the parameters and so on and so forth. So that's the way we use the templates. One of the other aspects that I'd like to talk about is a little about how we secure the lab. So the principle we have is we have a role which is called a lab user role. So what we do is we give the lab user role to the people we want to just use the lab, and we remove all other rights on the subscription. So that way, the only way for them to go and create VMs and stay within policy is going through the lab, and then we can control all of those and apply these policies. If policies is less interesting and you want them to be able to create VM from the lab or create VM from outside the lab on the subscription, you can do that as well. But what we've seen typically from our existing user, the idea of having the lab with some of the limits, some of the alerts, and all those benefits works very well to make sure that we keep our spend under control. Lastly, what I wanted to show is we also include support for containers. So when we do containers, we can create a Linux host, and then we can add the different containers on them. And that's an area where we'll add additional features. We also have a number of metrics and statistics that we can have for you to manage your lab. So for example, looking at how many VMs you have at a given point, how much of them are idle, how much of them are shut down. Again, shutdown is less expensive. Idle is kind of waste. So high idle areas shows that there might be some improvement to do in your policies or in your actually day-to-day usage. And the same for a number of metrics on how many users, how many VMs, which one of your templates are used, which one of your components or artifacts are used. So basically, we're providing a number of metrics that allows you to get a sense of how the lab is using and kind of tweaking it so that it becomes as efficient as you can from your customer perspective. So one of the things I briefly talked about was this idea of integrating with the build system. So for example, here we can directly from a Visual Studio build and from Visual Studio release management, we can actually go and add tasks in there to actually provision directly in the lab itself. So for example, here, I want to provision a lab, I want to remove a lab or start a VM that's in the lab. And the idea is that with the command lines and with the various actions, both on VSO and TFS, but as well, we're looking at the existing toolchain customers have, such as Jenkins or other tools. We can invoke the ability to create environments using the templates directly in the lab and applying all the policies. One of the questions we get is, why should I do it in the lab versus doing it directly in Azure? And really the distinction is, when we do it in the lab, it's this idea of having the subset of, these are the templates we use, these are the 7 environments that our team use, and also these are kind of the policies and the limit we want to control, we want to track our things. So it's really, when you think about it, it's really just a little superset really minded for the developers and testers on top of Azure. But fundamentally, it's really leveraging Azure and again, making it easy to use it either directly to the UI, directly to the command line, or connecting it into a more complete pipeline with existing tools such as VSO release management or build or Jenkins. So our goal here, in summary, is really to provide what we call worry-free self-service. So the idea there is that for the developers and tester, that they can go in self-service environment, get them very quickly in minutes, as opposed to going through a requesting process and waiting for days or weeks or even months, while keeping that inside of a constraint or a context that feels comfortable from an IT perspective and from a cost perspective. One of the other advantage, again, is this idea of quickly be ready to test. And the idea of picking existing templates with really the artifacts that we need allows me to quickly pick and choose what I need and just get going. And really with this idea of separating the complexity of setting up things once and then we just use them, makes it really quickly for you to get to your environment. Another aspect which I did not spend a lot of time on is this idea of create once and use everywhere. The concept there is actually when we save artifacts and when we save templates and when we create VMs, what we actually do save is an Azure resource management file, so that can actually be shared by other teams. So we do save everything we have into source control. So I can take my lab and point it to a source control location for where my own templates are, but I can also point my lab to a shared source control location at the enterprise level, organization level, or actually go and consume some of these templates from a public repository, so that basically out of all that, I pick the ones that I need for my team and use them, but also I can share with other teams. And I can also share it with additional tools later on the pipeline. So because what we have is a typical ARM template, then with your deployment tools, your release management tools, they can just consume the files that we have and call on them and use them to create the environments down the road on the pipeline directly in Azure. Again, because we keep everything as just standard Azure Resource Manager templates. So if you're interested in trying the software, we're currently in a limited preview. And basically, you need to go to our page, which is on the Azure website. And then from there, if you request invite, we have a short process where we go through approval and we have a limited number that we will accept. And then from there, you do have access directly to trying the service. So again, we encourage you to come in and try it. You can also find it from the virtual machine page. We have this line there, which you can click on the Learn More, which brings you to our page where you can actually request access to the lab. That's what we had to say about Azure DevTest Lab. Thank you for watching.